Let's go to Mark Mix. Mark is the president of the National Right to Work Foundation. Of course, that's coming under fire, especially if you live in Virginia. They want to get rid of that. Right to Work in Virginia has made Virginia one of the best states to do business in, and that's about to go down the tubes. Let's get to Mark Mix, president, National Right to Work Foundation. Mark Mix, you're live. Great to have you.
Hey, John. Good to be on with you again. And these are interesting times, and I'm using my finger quotes around that word because what we're seeing is a dramatic shift already in labor policy. In fact, 23 minutes into his administration, Joe Biden's associates sent a letter over to the National Labor Relations Board, an independent agency, albeit, to the general counsel of that agency, who is an independent operator, who is confirmed by the Senate, nominated by the president, who had a year remaining in his term. 23 minutes into the Biden administration, a letter went over asking him to resign immediately or be fired, and at 5 o'clock, he was fired. And apparently we're getting news now that the acting secretary, who was in the office over there under him, got the same letter yesterday. We're not sure whether she has been fired, but it is an interesting time. And getting back to Virginia, a lot of the same type of activity is occurring under the administration of Governor Northam. In fact, we've got these employees at the Fairfax Connector. John, it's a sad story, but it's one that unfortunately is all too common with labor union monopoly power over workers across the country. We have, these two workers at the Fairfax Connector found out that their union had signed an agreement that affected their conditions of employment without ratification of the employees in the bargaining unit. And basically, these workers found out that they were intending to sign a contract without worker votes. They filed for a decert petition with the National Labor Relations Board to throw the union out because there was not a contract in place. And once the petition made it to the National Labor Relations Board regional office in Baltimore, these employees were informed that the contract had been signed about a week ahead of time, and they no longer had the right to try to decertify the union because of a non-statutory provision created by the NLRB that says workers can be held into unions for up to 3 years by this so-called contract bar theory that was created legally. It's a really sad story, but one that unfortunately is going to be more prevalent as we move ahead.
What's next? Tell me, what do we have in store here? Mark Mix, don't mince words, lay it out. What are we going to be dealing with here?
Yeah, well, Vice President Harris and President Biden promised to labor union officials that they would work to repeal all 27 right-to-work laws across the country. And obviously there's an effort in Virginia right now in the legislature to repeal Virginia's right-to-work law. But they want to repeal all the right-to-work laws and go back to a federal mandate that says that union officials can have workers fired for simply failing to tender dues or fees. That doesn't mean if they're a good worker, a bad worker, a medium worker, or whatever kind of worker they are, whatever their skin color is, they simply would be fired if they didn't tender fees to a private organization. On top of that, their legislative priorities include card-check union certification, which means there's no longer going to be secret ballot votes for union representation. It will be if, a union official or a couple of them can show up at John Fredericks' porch at 11 o'clock at night, which I wouldn't recommend, but if they did and convinced you to sign a card, that would be tantamount to a vote for union representation, and you really can't get that card back. So what we have here is a major press, an aggressive press by union officials who are completely out of touch with rank-and-file workers. And I mentioned the operating engineers out in Nebraska now who are now off the job because the Keystone Pipeline has been canceled, or the workers in Pennsylvania who now are back under the Paris Climate Accord, according to the Biden administration, that will probably be out of work because we can't mine natural gas anymore. I mean, these are legislative proposals and proposals by a radical leftist government, now led by Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, that are going to basically say, if you're not in a union, you don't work in the United States of America.
Let's get to Virginia. Right to work in Virginia, Mark Mix, has been a cornerstone, a bedrock of how Virginia has been so easy to do business in, and is for a long time was the number one state to do business in the United States. That's going to get stripped. The governor's going to sign it. The liberals can't. They're going to go forward with it. Republicans don't have enough to stop it. What happens?
Well, John, it's not over yet. As Yogi Berra would once say, it's not over until the fat lady sings. I think he said that. I shouldn't credit someone that I don't know particularly. But here's the fight. I mean, when they tried to do the right to work repeal bill in the last legislative session, in a committee that was stacked with 12 Democrats and 3 Republicans so they could make sure that everything got through, they we thwarted the effort to repeal right to work on a 12-3 vote. Interestingly enough, I think politicians understand that the right to work law in Virginia and the right to work law in 26 other states does nothing to stop a worker from joining a union. John, you and I've talked about this. I mean, the language is very clear. It simply protects a worker and protects their jobs if they decide, if the individual employee decides, and these are the people that the union claims to represent, if they decide that they don't want to financially support what the labor unions are doing, like these trans dev employees. They were literally had a contract imposed on them without their vote, without the union official informing them of what the terms and conditions of employment are. And now they can't get relief for probably 3 years. This is why we have a right to work law in Virginia and 26 other states, so that rank and file workers can hold union officials accountable by withholding the most important element of the union business model, and that is union dues.
Unbelievable. I mean, it is unbelievable what is happening here in 2 hours from when Joe Biden took office. I mean, it's, remember they were talking about making Bernie Sanders the Commerce Secretary, the Labor Secretary. Mark Mix with us, President National Right to Work. Mark, I tell you what, it's like almost fasten your seatbelts and hold your breath. But I am optimistic in Virginia because there's a couple of senators that really understand how important right to work is to Virginia's economy. Caucus of the Corn, Eileen Filler Corn, and her whack job left-wing members in there, her caucus, have no clue. Most of them have never even had a job in the private sector, so they have no clue. But you got a couple state senators that really understand this. Morrissey, Democrat, moderate Petersburg, Peterson, Fairfax, even Scott Servos, who basically runs Virginia now, and for all intents and purposes, can't get anything done with or without him. I mean, he's skeptical of getting rid of it. So can we stop it?
Yeah, I think so, John. And the important thing is that we keep letting Virginians know what's happening in Richmond. That obviously it's happening by Zoom or whatever. It's hard to follow all this. No one can go to the Capitol and redress their government. But we have you, and we have others out there. We have the members of the National Right to Work Committee who are aggressively contacting their legislators as we speak, encouraging them to leave Virginia's right to work law alone. And, there's lots of other things that the House of Delegates and the state Senate have done that are going to have dramatic impact on taxpayers and workers across the Commonwealth. That came out of the last session, and it got postponed because of COVID, and will go into effect in May 1st. And this is the unionization of government employees across the Commonwealth, something that then Governor Doug Wilder in 1993 believed wasn't right for Virginia. So we had a Democrat governor, Doug Wilder, who signed a bill that said we can talk with all the unions you want to talk to, but we will not be forced to bargain with them on behalf of the taxpayers or the workers of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And of course, this legislature, this General Assembly, decided that Governor Wilder's wisdom wasn't good enough, and so they now have given union officials the ability to unionize government employees across the Commonwealth, which will have dramatic impacts like it has in New York, in California, in Illinois, in New Jersey, in Connecticut. And the list goes on of those states that have had union bargaining and union monopoly power for decades, and those are the states that are literally economic basket cases and are begging for bailouts from the United States government.
Crazy. Mark Mix with us. Mark Mix, President, National Right to Work Foundation. Mark, I know you've been fighting this a long time. Keep fighting. We just got to get through 24 months. But in Virginia, we got 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks. That's it.